Shabbat Shalom. Every Friday, as I was growing up, my grandpa, my Zeta, would pick me up from school and take me to 3 places. The first place was to the market, where I would eat some fresh Persian cucumbers. The second was to the kosher bakery, where I would eat some sprinkle cookies. And the third was to the kosher butcher. As I walked in the butcher, Joe Simon, the butcher, handed me a pack of sour sticks and gave my Zeta and I big hugs, and Joe and Zeta continued to catch up in Yiddish. I started to wonder, why did Joe always anxiously wait at the door, so excited to give me a pack of sour sticks and greet me with such love? I once asked my mom, and she told me that my namesake, Lilli, when she was in Auschwitz, only survived because a young Jewish man fed her potato skins through a wired fence. That man was named Joe Simon. Joe Simon handed me sour sticks every week like he handed my great-grandmother Lilli potato skins, but instead of in Auschwitz, we, thank God, were in the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, part of a first-generation immigrant community. I grew up in public school. I lived in Los Angeles my whole childhood, but I always knew that I was just a little bit different. My grandparents picked me up from school every day. All 4 of them lived within a 5-minute driving distance of my childhood home. I lived with my grandparents and parents together in my grandparents' house for many of my early years. My grandparents took me to places where I could learn about where they and my parents came from: the Carpathian Mountains, then the Soviet Union. And in my childhood, that place was Friday afternoons at Ventura Kosher with Joe Simon. My friends' grandparents lived in Palm Springs or in New York or in Florida, and their families were many generations American. Their grandparents surely didn't pick them up from school every day. This was the first-generation American household that I grew up in. By most measures, I was no different from my friends. But in the most intrinsic ways, I was raised with the knowledge that my parents and grandparents were actually strangers to Los Angeles. They had experienced rampant anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union, and therefore there were parts of me that were very, very different to my friends. The notion of both being a stranger, a ger, and a resident, a toshav, echo in our Torah portion, Hayei Sarah. Abraham, in the wake of his wife Sarah's death, immediately rushes to find a place to bury her. He approaches a Hittite man and said, "I am a ger v'toshav. I'm a resident, but I'm also an alien among you. Sell me a burial site so that I may remove my dead for burial." Abraham, remember, he was told by God to be a resident in the land of Canaan. Why did he himself claim himself a ger, a stranger, in this land he was told to go to? The commentator Sforno suggests that Abraham was telling the Hittite man, "I was once a stranger here, but now I'm not. And even though I'm not, I don't have a place to bury my wife. So, can I share this land with you?" The Hittite offers to gift Abraham the land, but instead he insists on paying. Why? Rabbi Stephanie Bernstein teaches, to secure a burial place for Sarah, Abraham purchases land that provides a legitimate foothold in Canaan, one recognized by the inhabitants of the land. As other family members die and are buried there, this burial site will become a concrete fulfillment of God's pledge to give the land of Canaan to Abraham and his descendants. Abraham, knowing that he was not one of the Canaanites, but wanting to build the nation that God envisioned there, worked carefully to build a relationship with the Hittites from a place of humility and gentleness. He just as easily could have gone up to the Hittite and said, "Hey, God told me I belong here. I'm going to take my land and bury my wife and all of my ancestors here." But he didn't. To Abraham, the balance between staking a claim in his new homeland and remembering his birthplace reverberates as our Parsha continues. Once Sarah is buried, Abraham initiates the search for a wife for Isaac, his son, by asking his servant Eliezer to go out and find Isaac's wife in the land where he was born. Eliezer comes back not only with a wife for Isaac, but with a wife whose kindness and humility mirrors that of Isaac's father, Abraham. We meet Rebekah along with Eliezer, and it's immediately clear to the reader that her kindness knows no bounds. She brings water to Eliezer and his 10 camels, the equivalent of 200 gallons of water, all by herself. We notice that Rebekah comes from a society vastly different from that which we've seen in the Torah so far. Namely, her voice as a woman and her relationships with other females, her mother, are explicit. When Rebekah goes to tell her family about her meeting with Eliezer, her possible shidduch, she goes to Beit Ima, her mother's house. When Eliezer asks Rebekah's fathers and brothers permission for marriage, they respond by saying, "Rebekah, what do you think?" And finally, when Eliezer is ready to bring Rebekah back to Canaan, her father and brothers suggest she waits some time, to which she responds, "Elech, I'm going to go." Rashi suggests that not only did Rebekah say, "I will go," but "I will act on my own, whether you approve or not." Rebekah's use of voice, her sense of self, and her kindness are surely different from the women we've met in the Tanakh so far. When we first meet her, she's untethered and acting on her own accord, and when she gets married, she still functions independently, guiding Isaac. The Midrash actually tries to deny Rebekah's autonomy, teaching that possibly God never spoke to Rebekah. But next week, we see God speak directly to Rebekah in Parshat Toldot. Rebekah enters her marriage as a ger, a new resident to the land of Canaan, a stranger to the land of Canaan. But she's Toshav. She knows who she is. She's settled in her ways. She knows how to use her voice. She gets married, and her independence does not waver. Rebekah, in her brand new land, brings the only comfort Isaac received in 3 years since Sarah's death. Abraham and Rebekah are intrinsically connected in their emotional fortitude. Abraham labeled as a ger v'toshav, and Rebekah acting with the same kindness and humility that goes along with the title. Our Torah goes so far to make this connection crystal clear. When God told Abraham to go to Canaan, God said, "Lech lecha." And Rebekah tells her family, "Elech, I'm going to go." I once watched a rabbi speak on the book of Ruth beautifully, totally off the cuff. After she finished, I said to her, "Whoa, you must have wrote that whole thing down." She replied, "No, I have a lot of practice, but I still have no idea what I'm doing." I sat and reflected, what does it mean to be so familiar with your home or your place in society or your place in your family, but still have the humility to recognize that you are a stranger in God's land, or in the case of my rabbi, still a stranger on her long-standing pulpit? I grew up asking myself the same sorts of questions. Is where I come from actually so different from my friends? Did they also spend their Fridays with Joe Simon? Can my family still be strangers and residents of Los Angeles? As I grew up, my questions changed. How do I continue the kindness of Joe Simon, the insistence to teach me where I'm from like my Zeta had? How do I make sure that my future family feels the ounce of difference that keeps me feeling like a slight stranger? You see, One of the biggest blessings of my life is that I toggle the line between a ger and a toshav. That is how I become uniquely me. As we, the Jewish community, acutely feel the liminality associated with being a ger v'toshav, we can feel like strangers, especially in the last month. Though I was brought up acutely aware of institutionalized anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union, I was completely unaware, had no experience of such horrors in America, along with my friends, until the last few weeks. Jews have always been in positions of power, supported by the government. That's so clear in Pennsylvania itself with our Jewish governor. There's no solace, no easy answer to toggling the line between being a ger and toshav, and right now it gets murkier each day. May Abraham and Rebecca teach us that we can live gracefully and humbly because of, in spite of, this tension. For me, it's always remembering that Joe Simon and my Zeta were so happy, so thrilled that I grew up in Los Angeles. The tension of being a ger and toshav makes me who I am. It can make us, the Jewish community, who we are. We live self-assured as a toshav, while still having the sense of wonderment, the open eyes, and the open hearts that being a ger forces us to have. Shabbat shalom.